On behalf of Northern Light Vipassana Society, I wish to welcome everyone from the bottom of my heart. It's so delightful to see so many of you here, and it is a special delight to welcome my old friend in the Dharma, Joseph Goldstein, who is honoring us with his teaching at this retreat. Joseph brought with him a teacher trainee, Jill Shepherd from New Zealand, and a warm welcome to her too. Would you say this is the same flame, or that it is a completely different flame? When I first met Joseph, we were 21 years old, and at the beginning of our interest in Buddhism. In fact, we met each other the first time at an Abhidharma lecture at the Buddhist University in Bangkok. And later we had the good fortune to spend about 6 years together with our Indian Vipassana teacher, Anagarika Munindra, in Bodh Gaya in northern India. Years that were foundational for our spiritual life. Anagarika Munindra was an amazing teacher, deeply steeped in the Pali canonical wisdom of the oldest existing Buddhism, Theravada, an outstanding pupil of one of the presumably greatest, or presumably the greatest Vipassana teacher of the 20th century, Mahasi Sayadaw of Burma, and deeply imbued with the traditions, with the living tradition and realization of the Buddha Dharma, the universal law of the awakened one. Today, Anagarika Munindra is rightly regarded as one of the founding fathers of the Vipassana movement in the West, and indirectly of the whole mindfulness wave that has swept through Western culture in the last 2 or 3 decades. For instance, the American Dr. John Kabat-Zinn was inspired to develop mindfulness-based stress reduction during a retreat, a Vipassana retreat at the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, a center that was primarily founded by pupils of Anagarika Munindra, foremost among them Joseph. In ancient times, a very famous epithet of the Buddhist teaching was a come and see thing. The Buddhist teaching was a come and see for yourself phenomenon. In fact, at the beginning of the order the Buddha founded, disciples were ordained by these very words, ehi passaku, come and see for yourself, ehi passaku. And Anagarika Munindra had his own variation of that spiritual invitation. Come and sit, he would say. Come and sit, he would say to Westerners who came to him and told him about their existential confusion, their disbeliefs, their doubts and bewilderment, often after having been with various teachers and gurus. He would then say, why don't you just sit down and look into your mind? Then the whole of the Buddhist teaching will unfold itself to you. Come and sit was the essence of Munindra-ji's teaching. And the essence of the whole of the Buddha's Dharma can be summed up in similar few striking words that emphasizes this point, like be your own lamp. Take refuge in yourself without having another refuge. And how does one take refuge in oneself without having another refuge? You do this by practicing the four foundations of mindfulness as Buddha on his deathbed admonished his disciples. So if you want to see for yourself by your own light, you have come to the right place. This retreat, because in the next fully 7 days we are going to practice the four foundations of mindfulness in an intensive and timeless way that will connect you with a living tradition that encompasses, among others, our teacher, Anagarika Munindra, and his teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw, and the whole line of teachers going back to the time of the Buddha. So with this formal words to begin the Kerteminde Vipassana Retreat, I'll hand over to someone who is an outstanding example of this living tradition in the West today, my friend Joseph.
I'd also like to welcome all of you to this retreat, especially to thank Uffe and Linda and all of the people and volunteers who helped to arrange it all. You know, it always seems so easeful. 100 people coming together, as if it all happens by itself. But of course it takes a huge amount of work and organizing to put something like this together, so many thanks for all that work. There's a line from the Dhammapada, which, as many of you know, is a collection of verses of the Buddha, where he says the mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. You know, and there's a tremendous depth of meaning in just those few lines. The mind can create the greatest good, and it can also create the greatest harm, both for ourselves and for others. Now, over the past 30 years, many different Buddhist traditions have come to the West. It's really been quite amazing. The explosion of interest and the practice of the teachings of the Buddha. And even in the Theravada tradition, there are many methods of Vipassana, of insight, that have been taught. There are different lineages of practice. But going back to those very early years, this was in the late 60s when I first met Uffe in Bodh Gaya in India, and we were practicing together. And over all these years, for me, the practice has just gotten simpler and simpler and simpler. It's condensed into 5 words, the whole practice. Be aware and don't cling. Whenever the mind wanders or we get lost in thoughts, which will happen countless times, simply begin again. That's all, begin again, begin again, begin again. And even if we begin again 10,000 times in the day, we are practicing. It's the beginning again that is the practice. And so we can do it with interest, we can do it with good humor, rather than self-judgment. In the Zen tradition, there was a dialogue, one of these Zen dialogues, between a Chinese Zen master, I'm not sure my pronunciation is correct, but his name was Shi Tao. And a student came to him. This was a great, great Zen master. And the student said, he asked, what am I supposed to do? So I imagine many of you come to the retreat with a somewhat similar question. Okay, we're all here together. What am I supposed to do? So Shi Tao said, why are you asking me? So I loved that right away. Why are you asking me? So the student said, where else can I find what I'm looking for? So all of this is, this is how we approach our practice. What am I supposed to do? Why ask me? Where else can I find what I'm looking for? And then Shi Tao, the Zen master, good Zen fashion, says, are you sure you lost it? How can I find what I'm looking for? Are you sure you lost it? So there's something very important in that little dialogue. Okay. Did it take any special effort to be aware of the sound of the bell? It's as simple as can be. The sound arises and we're aware of it. If you just make a little experiment now and you move your arm, and simply feel it moving. Is there anyone who doesn't feel their arm moving? It's as simple as can be. We haven't lost it. The awareness is always right there. We simply need to remember. So I want to emphasize the simplicity of the practice. It's not that we're looking for something we don't have, and you struggle and you fight with yourself, and no, it's already here. Just like we heard the sound of the bell, just as we can feel the arm moving. It's incredibly simple. It's so simple that we overlook it. You know, we think, oh, this can't be it. So when you get caught up in whatever mind stories or internal dramas or whatever it is, you know, that catches the mind, in the moment when you become aware that the mind has gone off, simply begin again. It's already here. We simply need to remember. And in fact, that's one of the meanings of the Pali word sati, which is translated usually as mindfulness, but one of the meanings of the word in Pali is to remember. And it's very useful to have that meaning in mind. Yes, we just remember. And in the remembering, we are already aware. Every time you wake up from being lost, highlight, pay attention to what that moment of mindfulness, of wakefulness is like. Because right in that moment we are having a direct experience of the nature of awareness. Because we've gone from being lost when we're not aware, and then in a moment to being wakeful. In that moment we can discover experientially, not theoretically, we are experiencing the nature of wakefulness. In the course of this week, we'll be exploring many nuances of the mind and of the body, and many different kinds of balance. So I just want to mention one particular balance that's important tonight, because you will need to practice with this throughout the retreat. And that is the balance between relaxation and alertness. Both of these are really important. The practice needs to be very relaxed. Concentration comes through relaxation. It doesn't come through efforting. So we want to be very relaxed, settled back in our practice. But if we get too relaxed, because then we go to sleep. So we need to balance the relaxation with the qualities of investigation, of interest, of awareness. But we need to be careful not to go to the other extreme where we become hyper-vigilant. Do you know what that is? You know, when we're so afraid of getting lost that we're just on edge, trying, I have to be with this moment, and this moment, and this moment. And we're working ourselves up by being over-vigilant. So just be watching, you know, the quality of your balance during the day, during the week. And notice, if you're too sleepy, then you need more interest. If you're too tense from over-striving, you need to relax. One of the great gifts of the retreat is creating an environment of silence. It is so rare in our world to have the space of silence, and it is so powerful and so beautiful. And even if you did nothing else this whole week but stay in silence, or mostly in silence, so much would be revealed. There's a tremendous power and beauty. So I'd really encourage you to dive into the silence, into the sea of silence. We don't have many opportunities in our lives, you know, to enjoy that. Another little Munindra-ji story. This goes back to those early years in India. So one time we were practicing in Bodh Gaya, the place, the Buddha's enlightenment. And one time, it was just in the little village, you know, at a tea shop, having a cup of tea, and Munindra-ji comes walking by. And on that particular day, I just had a bad headache. So he asked me how I was, and I said, oh, well, you know, everything's okay, but I have this really bad headache. And all he said was, I hope you are enjoying it. Well, I don't think I was at the moment, but it was a good reminder that we can hold every experience, both pleasant and unpleasant, with a heart mind of friendliness. One expression of metta, one expression of this friendliness, of course, is undertaking the commitment to the precepts. And as you know, it's in Buddhism, generally lay people undertake 5 precepts. And this is in their lay life, and there's just one little addition that we usually do on retreat. So just as a reminder, I'm sure you're all very familiar, it's not to kill, and even small things, or insects, just to refrain from killing. You know, if there's some insect in your room, we can take it outside. We don't have to extinguish life. And not stealing, not taking that which isn't offered. Now, in the lay life, generally, the 3rd precept is refraining from sexual misconduct, which means not engaging in sexual activity that's really harmful or deceitful to oneself or others. But here on retreat, we take a more monastic understanding of the precept to refrain from all sexual activity for the time of the retreat. And it just provides kind of a conservation of our energy and a focus of our energy in a good way. Refraining from wrong speech. Of course, if we're observing silence, that makes it easy. But you might pay attention, just as an additional little investigation, even if we're not speaking. From time to time, you might notice within the framework of right speech, what kind of thoughts you're having. If the thoughts were spoken, would they be right speech? Well, that's interesting to see. Because of course our speech comes from our thoughts. This is a chance to settle back and see, okay, well, what's the source of our speech? And we're just paying attention, not judgmentally. We're just seeing, is this speech that causes harmony or causes division? Is it helpful speech or useless talk? So we watch all this in terms of the thoughts we're having. And the fifth precept, as you know, is to refrain from taking any kinds of intoxicants that cloud the mind. We really want to develop the innate power and the innate clarity of the mind. Not rushing, making it a practice and paying attention to when we are, and then settling back. Silence, and just, I love silence. Let your only companion for this week be awareness. And so we begin to see the potential for understanding. So not rushing, and silence, and metta. The last qualities I want to emphasize just in this opening night, it's really three, which is patience and equanimity and perseverance. You've all done practice before, so you know that the meditation does not go like that. It's not like a straight line and our practice just gets easier and easier and better and more concentrated, up, 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 and then we're enlightened. No, it goes like this. A lot of ups and downs. But over time we begin to see that the slope of the curve is going up. You know that? So even though there are a lot of ups and downs, but if you plot the slope of the curve, we can see real development over time. And the Buddha emphasized that this is a path of development. But because it involves a lot of ups and downs, times when we feel good and times when we don't, it's not all about pleasant feelings. There's going to be a lot of unpleasant feelings in the body, difficult states of mind. We really are exploring the whole show. Sometimes we'll be really interested and fascinated and a lot of energy, and other times almost certainly you will be sleepy and bored and wondering why you came. And that's just all part of the path. So we need to remember that, and it's difficult to remember. When you're in a kind of down period, it's just very easy to forget that this is a natural part of our practice. So that's why I'm just emphasizing it now. So we just remember, and we're patient with the difficulties. And we develop equanimity about the difficulties. Yeah, sometimes it's really good and easy and light and delightful, and sometimes it's not. And we just develop a capacity for being with the whole show. And perseverance, just beginning again and beginning again. So that's really all I wanted to speak about this evening. It's just a wonderful, to sit in a room with 100 people, a few more, doing this together, given the state of the world, this is a remarkable occurrence. And so I would really encourage you to acknowledge that and take delight in your own efforts to be here and do the practice. It's a rare thing, and the world is desperately in need of people doing this, of becoming more awake, more aware, more mindful. So if you'd like just to take a little stretch, and then we'll do a short sitting this evening. I'd like to give just a little introduction to the beginning instructions. As you know, all the techniques and methods of the practice come from this one discourse of the Buddha called the Satipatthana Discourse, Satipatthana Sutta, which is usually translated as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, or the 4 ways of establishing mindfulness. Just to say, if at any point you can't hear me, raise your hand. So. I had read this discourse many, many times over the years. But just in the last couple of years, as I was rereading it, there was one line in it which suddenly jumped out and took on a whole new meaning and really changed the way I practiced. And this line says, and it's repeated many times in the discourse, the line says, be mindful, and then in quotes, there is a body, to the extent necessary for clear knowing and continuous mindfulness. Okay, be mindful, quote, there is a body, to the extent necessary for clear knowing and continuous mindfulness. So there are 2 pieces here that I want to emphasize. One is that phrase, be mindful, there is a body. The fact that it's in quotes in the sutta suggests that that phrase can be repeated in the mind. It's almost like the repetition of a mental note or a mental label or a reminder. There is a body. There is a body. There is a body. So I want to explain how we can use that, because it was very helpful for me, and I've been teaching this now for the last few years, and people have found it extremely helpful. You know, when you're building a house, You lay the foundation, and then you put up the framework, the frame of the house, the walls. But before it's enclosed, the wood is there as the framework, but you can see through it because haven't put the walls on yet. Everybody have a sense of that? The phrase "there is a body" can be used in exactly the same way as that frame of the house. So there is a body. We just become aware in a general sense. Oh, there is a body. We're holding that general frame, and then within that frame, we become aware, for example, of the body breathing. We might be aware of different sensations. We might be aware of sounds. But instead of the mind narrowing on the breath, like that, we're holding the bigger frame, there is a body, allowing the body to breathe within it. Found that it creates a much greater sense of relaxation, of not forcing the breath in any way. It gives a kind of groundedness and stability, allowing for the feeling of the breath. We can be just as concentrated, but without the narrowing. We're holding the bigger frame, there is a body. To the extent necessary for clear knowing. So this is a really important, just as when I opened the talk, ringing the bell or moving the arm, how much effort is needed to be aware? Not a lot. Simply be aware, be mindful to the extent necessary for clear knowing and continuous mindfulness. So it's very simple. There is a body. And repeat that phrase and experiment to see how often it's helpful to repeat it. In the beginning, you might repeat it more often and then maybe a little less, but keep coming back to that. There is a body, and you're just feeling the sense of the body sitting. There's a body. And in that openness, you will automatically feel the body breathing because that is going on. So does this seem clear as an instruction, or do you have any questions about this particular instruction? And a lot of this and a lot of what we say in the instructions, it's all an experiment. It's really to see, okay, well, what works? What works to what? 5 words. Be aware and don't cling. That's why we're doing that. That's the purpose of it all. And so with this instruction, there is a body. And then within that, holding that frame, just be with the feeling of the body breathing. It's very simple.